Hello and welcome to Psychedelics Today. My name is Kyle Buller and I am the host for today's episode. And today I get to chat with two Vital graduates, Alice Dommert and Kara Tremain. Alice was a graduate of the first Vital cohort, and we actually knew Alice from the Dream Shadow Breathwork community and worked with Alice for quite a while. And she's actually the person that's been behind all the retreats throughout these past few years with Vital. So it's been really exciting to get Alice on to chat about retreats. If you're interested in learning more, you can check out her website, prasadawholebeing.com. That's her corporate wellness business, and the infinitecenter.org, which is a new project of Alice and some other Vital graduates for the retreats. And Kara Tremain is part of our second year that just graduated. So congrats again, Kara, and cohort 2, just finishing up back in April. And Kara is a coach, also training in somatic experiencing, craniosacral therapy, and a lot more. And if you're interested in learning more about Kara's work, you can check out her website, karatremain.com. That's KARATREMAIN.com. And we'll have all these links in the show notes. So be sure to check that out on the website or in the show notes section, wherever you listen to podcasts. So in this episode, we chat about our Vital retreats. We chat about the retreat process. We talk about things that we've learned over the years, and especially Alice shares about what she's learned over the years, helping us coordinate these retreats. I think we put on around 13 retreats for the Vital program. So if you are a person that puts on events, retreats, anything like that, this episode I think will actually be really interesting and maybe some things to consider. We also chat about the power of breathwork and somatics and the importance of learning the breath and somatic techniques for nervous system regulation during psychedelic experiences. And we also chat about community and the power of community and that group process. If you're interested in joining us on any of our upcoming retreats, we do have some openings. We have a retreat coming up in July in Pennsylvania at a place called River Mountain, and that will take place July 9th through the 14th. And that will be a breathwork retreat, so you'll have 2 experiences with breathwork, 2 experiences with sitting. If you are interested in learning more, you can find out by checking out psychedelicstoday.com or clicking the links in the show notes. We also have a retreat coming up in October that will be back in Agora Hills. We just wrapped up one of our retreats over there a couple weeks ago, and it was really great, and we can't wait to go back there in October. And yeah, just a reminder, even though these are advertised as Vital retreats and kind of part of our Vital training program, we do have some seats open to the public. So if you're interested, definitely go check that out. Again, you can find out more info on the show notes or checking out psychedelicstoday.com. So we hope to see you at one of our upcoming retreats. And I think that is it for this introduction. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Alice Dommert and Kara Tremain, and we'll catch you on the other side.
Vital, our 12-month certificate in integrative psychedelic studies, is back for its 4th cohort starting September 17th, 2024. Vital is a process-oriented course with a deeply multidisciplinary curriculum that incorporates clinical, scientific, and relational domains alongside indigenous, shamanic, and transpersonal wisdom traditions. Vital is a vibrant community of students and alumni from around the world committed to merging powerful inner work with expanded professional scope of practice. Through lectures, study groups, webinars, elective modules, process papers, and online affinity groups, you'll have all the support you need to develop your own vision and model for lifelong growth in this exciting field. And new for this 4th round of Vital, we've introduced the option of choosing one of 5 specialization graduation pathways, which are regenerative business and leadership, depth and Jungian perspectives, somatic and trauma, spiritual emergence, or microdosing. Applications for Vital are open until August 23rd, with early bird discounts of $2,000 available until July 22nd. We invite you to apply early to improve your chances of being accepted into this global community of the next generation of psychedelic-informed practitioners. Head to vitalpsychedelictraining.com to learn more about this transformative journey, download our full course curriculum, and to apply.
Alice Dommert, Kara Tremain, welcome to Psychedelics today. Really excited to have you both on the podcast to talk about our retreats that we've been hosting. And I'm just excited to kind of dig in to talk about that. So we'll just start off with some introductions. And Alice, I'll pass it over to you to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kyle. So my name's Alice Dommert. I actually know Kyle and Joe from training with Dream Shadow in Vermont in transpersonal breathwork. And I was running a corporate wellness company in 2022 since 2009. And I heard that there was this amazing program coming out called Vital. And so, I'd had a series of rebirthing breathwork training and transpersonal breathwork training and plant medicine experiences. And I reached out to Kyle and Joe and said, hey guys, I'd like to be part of this. I want people to know about breathwork and its sort of role in the world of exceptional experience. I'd love to be part of this experiment of people learning and talking about it. And was lucky enough to sort of say, hey, how are you guys doing the retreats? Could I be part of that? And so it's been really amazing since early 2022, working with the whole team. We've delivered 13 retreats. We have 2 more coming up. And we've learned a lot and had a lot of fun. And Kara was one of the folks who jumped into one of our really new locations that we hadn't been at until last year and just have been having a great time. So thanks to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, huge shout out to you, Alice, and the team behind the scenes putting on the retreats. Definitely couldn't have been doing it without you. So yeah, I really appreciate all your work over the years. All right. And Kara, we'll have you introduce yourself as well.
Yeah. So I am a growth and development coach and a somatic practitioner, and I have a strong interest in psychedelics. And I actually met somebody who had attended the first cohort of Vital, and she said a lot of great things and made the decision to go into year 2 and just finished in April. It's hard to believe it's only been 6 weeks since we finished. Met a lot of great people. Obviously, the 2 of you. Loved our retreat, which we'll talk about in the session. But I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. Yes. And congratulations. It's been really fun to get to know you on this journey. And yeah, it's been really awesome.
Yeah, me too.
All right. So Alice, maybe we'll start this off with kind of the retreats and how we kind of started to develop kind of like the structure around the retreats. So part of the retreat for Vital is to have an experience with a non-ordinary state of consciousness, and kind of 2 reasons for that. Since a big focus of the program is on harm reduction and integration, to be able to give people an experience if they haven't had an experience with psychedelics, breathwork, or any other sort of non-ordinary state. But it also provides a nice framework for people to have an experience being in the room with people in these exceptional experiences and learning how to kind of hold space for themselves and others. And also, the integration process afterwards. So, I think, we talk a lot about integration, but, I think also actually helping to do it. And it's one of the reasons why I really love breathwork too. It, I think, serves as a really great integration practice, an integration modality. So Alice, when you came on, we were trying to figure out how do we design these retreats? We had a little bit of a template of what was going on at Dream Shadow and how, we'd host those 5-day breathwork retreats up there. But you kind of brought in more of this whole being perspective and thinking about it in a bit of a different way than just say, we're going to sit here and lecture in some of the downtime at the retreats and have it be more didactic, but kind of weave in more of this whole being perspective. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I also have a background in positive psychology. So at Persada, we had really developed a framework of whole being, and that really comes from this wholeness of the whole person. The transpersonal breathwork experience, sort of that 3-hour modality, is one piece, but just like we have preparation, intentions, and then integration, I really was thinking and had been to a lot of different retreats and thinking about what do you wrap around and how can we further embody the actual transpersonal breathwork experience. So, that piece of looking at, are there movements that we can do in the morning? And so that whole being was really bringing in more programs like Marco Dapke. I brought him initially. He is my CrossFit coach and really wanted to do some exercise in the morning, some more actually pranayama breath work. We invited in our friend Catherine Burkhardt, and really looking at not just the mandala drawing, but soul collage. we really started to bring in an element. One of the Vital students, who's now one of my business partners, Jared Madison, really brought in Enneagram, sort of self-discovery. So that really kind of broader framework of elements. The other thing that happened, early on when we were sort of envisioning these was I read a book called The Art of Gathering. And of course, this was also kind of when we were all coming out of COVID. And really, how do you create meaningful time together? And that really coincided with the heart of the transpersonal modality that Stan Groff came up with, is group process. How do we be very, very intentional about, if we're going to spend time together, how do we create opportunities for us to really deeply, deeply connect?
Group process. We've probably talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but I wonder if you could share a little bit more around what that definition is and kind of how you view that.
Yeah, so often we have had a group project experience. When we were in elementary school or middle school, it was pretty awful. And so we all sort of decided, like, I don't like working with a group because somebody didn't carry their weight. Or our main experience of group might have been somewhat dysfunctional family. And a lot of times, or at work, we're working on sort of a group project. And a lot of those environments, we feel judged. We feel like we can't be open. We're not really our authentic self. And so when we go into these environments and we have agreed upon sort of ways that we're going to be together, for example, when we're sharing, we don't have crosstalk. And so when you set up a structure where you are creating a safe environment, and that's the commitment of facilitators, in most modalities, is to create a physically safe environment, but also that emotionally safe environment. And so when we create that emotionally safe environment, and we're also having opportunities to where we have a what matters conversation. So we quickly get deep into, like, why am I here? What matters? And, in our day-to-day life, we don't have a whole lot of time to dive into those things, and space to really think about, why am I here? What am I doing? Let me take a big picture perspective and see, am I in alignment with what my purpose is, or what my aspirations are.
Yeah.
So that, group process could also be collective healing. It could also be just collective imagining, collective dreaming. I know we talk a lot about, as we need to, healing trauma. But I also come from a creative background. I'm an architect in my first life. And also, how do we have collective aspirations and dreams at the same time that we're working, the other side of working through some of our past experiences that were really hard.
Yeah. Something that comes to mind when I think about the group process, which I share at most of the retreats, something that our teacher Lenny had mentioned, we're the descendants of successful tribes. And that started to kind of really hit home when I read this book called The Neuroscience of Relationships, Dr. Louis Cozolino, I believe. But really talking about the brain as more of a social organ, how it's developed for communication and for social interactions, and just thinking about the importance of that. And I just think about some of my own experiences, and I'm sure you guys have your own stories too, about sharing in a group, being seen and heard and witnessed in a group, and how healing that is, but also terrifying and maybe one of the biggest collective fears amongst humans, and maybe other animals too, right? Being rejected from the group. And so it's also a very scary and vulnerable thing to be a little bit more intimate and vulnerable in groups, but I think also important. So yeah, this whole being kind of perspective, Kara, I'd love to maybe hear a little bit of your experience. You came to one of our retreats in Pennsylvania with breathwork, and just kind of hearing, like, how was that for you?
Yeah. In fact, when you were just talking, I thought the word vulnerable came into my head, and then you said the word vulnerable. It's a really, I'm just going to start right there, just because it's a thread from where we left. And I've done a few different group processes, more than a few, and they're not always comfortable. In fact, I would say a lot of the times they've been uncomfortable. And so there's not, it's such a big part of the process, integration, well, even in the preparation, the sharing that we do coming into it and the sharing that we do coming out of the breath work. It's so important to feel held. And so far in my life, that was the most held that I have felt in a group, in any experience. And it started with you guys. I feel like I'm kind of starting from the middle part, but it's what's coming up for me right now is just how held we felt. and we all said it. We all said it by the very end, but all the way through, was who you chose to be there and how you set it up. There was both a container and a freedom for everybody to really show up as they needed. And it was so simple. I've thought about it several times since. It's been almost a year now since we did that retreat. It was so seamless that it's like you didn't even realize that it was being held for you in the way that it was. And so it's actually hard to articulate, but it was a very spiritual experience. And that land, just the place that you chose even to have it, felt so deep and nurturing. And then we've all talked about this, that the right people all come together. It's just how it happens every time you have a group. And there's lessons there for better or worse. But yeah, I just really appreciated not just the two of you, but who you chose to be there as well. And I can say a lot more, but
thank you. Well, I'd be interested if you're open to it, and you don't need to like name retreats or groups that you've been in, but like, I know you kind of just touched on it, like who we had there and the container and the space, but like, was there anything that was like different that kind of stood out to you? And I just think this from more of a learning experience for those that are listening that like host retreats. And so maybe looking at like different retreats, maybe what worked, what didn't work, what kind of really stood out. Because it's like an interesting thing. We've taken this very kind of non-directive approach at times, which can be really difficult for some folks. I think it can, I think it can also create that space for vulnerability and exploration, while being in, say, other kind of group containers, very directive, and there's this thing that's happening to somebody maybe, versus like more of this collective coming together and trying to co-create it. But yeah, I don't know. I'd just be interested to hear some of like your perspectives on that.
What's different? The first thing that came to me when you said that was humility. I don't know that there's. I think it's really hard for certain group leaders not to get caught up in the, sage on the stage thing. And there was just a real humility to the entire group. And it's really no small thing. And so it felt like we were all at the same level. And I think that's why there was such deep work that was done. And if I can take one step back too, and we've talked about this before, it wasn't the retreat that I was hoping I would get, because I wasn't interested in breathwork, right? And there were some people who showed up because it was breathwork, but there were a lot of people, and I know you've had this because I've talked to other participants in like Costa Rica and Portugal. It wasn't a first choice for people. They really, because we come to Vital because we're interested in psychedelics, and so we wanted that experience. And me and several other people, not only at my retreat in Pennsylvania, but the others, it was so inspiring that, we all wanted it in our lives in some form after that. So that part was different. I mean, than what I can't compare it to any other breath work retreats per se, but retreats in general, just doing deep work.
Yeah, I guess my question was more around that group process and group container.
Yeah. What else can I say about that? Well, I guess, and the reason why I bring up the breathwork piece is that it did, it creates a different atmosphere than I think, medicine can. It's just different. So I think that's also part of the container, is that work itself. And that you really have to show, I mean, we talk about showing up and meeting medicine. This is really you driving the bus. And so the way you walked us through it, but creating the container for the breath work was so surprising. There was direction without direction, right? And so I think that can be hard for people, but there was just something, the way, and I even think about just the way you were all surrounding us during the sessions. And yeah, just there's a real peace to it, and a real knowing and a real trust.
Thank you. Yeah, that non-directive approach, yeah, it can be tough. I think Tav Sparks talked about it as like doing, not doing in some of the
Yeah.
trainings.
Yeah.
And it is a tough thing because I think sometimes when we get into these group spaces, even as facilitators, we really want to help people, right? And sometimes there's this need to want to try to do something and try to control certain situations. And sometimes you need to do that, right? There's time and place for it. But I think like this framework that we've been really kind of leaning on over the past few years is trying to create that. And so Alice, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about the evolution. I mean, we've done 13 retreats total. It has evolved over the years, and that's for sure. So I'm wondering, what are some of the things that you've really learned over the past few years putting these retreats on with us?
Yeah. It's interesting because my first career was architecture. And then at some point when I started a corporate wellness company, I really wanted to help people sort of design their life. And so my Vital project in cohort 1 was to actually say, like, what did we learn and what is the process? And I really identified kind of 3 bubbles. The first one is really designing a transformational group process experience, from how do people register? How do they ask questions about the retreat, all the way through kind of integration, and really very thoughtfully thinking about each one of those steps and how you can support people in those steps. And I really felt like it was also very, very important for, in the Vital program, to be modeling that kind of the best practices in that. So that was kind of the first circle, the experience. Really, Kara, as you mentioned, like really looking at what I call kind of, if you're in the tech world, a full stack team. We brought Marco Dapke in. At the beginning, it was like, why are you bringing a CrossFit guy?
We were skeptical of that.
Exactly. And yet, that somatic embodiment of how Marco, really brought us in the mornings and prepared us for the breath work. So the range of people who had the team, bringing in the soul collage, bringing in just more indigenous practices, just different elements that different people had within their practices on the full team.
And yoga.
And chanting. I have a
And
chanting
chanting.
practice, and one time was just like, hey, I need to be chanting in the morning. Let's just, anybody want to chant with me? And suddenly chanting became, one of the core elements. So that the team, and really making it a growing experience for the team. We typically get there a day, at least a couple of hours ahead the night before, so that we can really bond as a team and have that sort of gel and energy together, so that we can really be solid. And then I call it the third bubble, the kind of making it happen. And that's the logistics. And a lot of times that's what hangs people up. But Meg Townsend on our team has done a lot of retreats. And so we really had a filter about, I really demanded that we would be in places that had great natural environments. I've done a lot of work on biophilic design and the sort of power of nature for integration and preparation. You can't argue with the birds singing and the stream bubbling and, wake up to a dewy, beautiful meadow in the mornings, versus just putting something in a ballroom. And, that has an impact. The costs are more when you go to a place. And also looking at, what are these centers? What's their philosophy? Are they paying their people? And so that was also really important, that the whole entire experience be something that was transformative for every person who was involved, not just the participants, not just the facilitators, the retreat center. So those were kind of the 3 bubbles. And then that became our guide, both for planning year 2 and year 3, but also our measuring, our sort of metrics. Like, how did we do? And we did. We created we have a survey after every single retreat. We made a little report card, and we'd say A-, C+, B-, about each of the elements, and really got some great feedback from folks to make those changes.
Yeah. Yeah. And besides the little hiccups the first year with locations, all the other locations have been fantastic. And when you're mentioning that, a question popped up in my head. Do you guys know, I guess, kind of like the stages of rites of passages from like an anthropological perspective? There's like 3 main phases. There's the separation from, your daily, needs, like, anything that's going to keep you tied down to who you are, in a sense. So it's like trying to separate from that. And so when I think about location, I think some of the locations that we have selected over the years have been kind of, sometimes felt like a little remote at times, right? It's like really pulling away from your daily life, and how important that is to kind of step away and really be immersed in the experience. So it's like that separation. And then the second phase is this liminal phase, maybe the introduction of this non-ordinary experience, and thousands of ways to alter consciousness and those states through various traditions and cultures. And then the third would be the worldly return, coming back. But I just think about how important that separation is. Like, I've been to retreats too, where it feels like part of me is still online, or like, I know we've had non-residential retreats where people have to get and figure out Ubers and stuff like that. But there is something special about like not having to worry about any of that stuff. Like, you're just in it, right? And you're able to really put all your attention in what's showing up for you in the moment.
Yeah, in the art of gathering, she really gets into that aspect about like, how do you prepare and what is the world you're creating? And then it's just like integration, how people have a great experience. And we've had people be like, how am I supposed to go back to my life now? And I think what's been so interesting is that, as Vital students, people go in and they're like, oh, I want training. But many of them have, when they've been in that environment, and I really see the people who are coming into Vital as leaders. All of them are leaders. We're all trying to figure out what is this world that we have experienced in psychedelics and plant medicine? And then what is the way that we can contribute to making that more available to the many different populations of people who need this type of access to these things? And so that's hard work when you're a trailblazer.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to start a company with something that's not legal yet, or you're working underground, or you're doing whatever. And so it was so amazing to watch people as they became unplugged, and then they would remember practices that they had. They would get that inspiration or that clarity on, you know what? Nope, I've been thinking about 10 different ideas and I'm going back and this is one of them. I think the other just really amazing thing is that, in transpersonal breathwork experience, those 3 hours, there's really no talking. And so someone who came to the retreat, who was actually a doctor, reflected afterwards and said, I think I saw more healing happen in that room than I've seen in the last 10 years. And then people reflected later, people who had they were a therapist or a somatic person or something, and they reflected by bringing that to their practice and allowing, it's the inner healer. It's Stan Grof's idea of making a safe space, us holding safe space and creating that as facilitators for people to do that work. And those Vital students reflected that when they went back, they had taken a little bit more of that time for themselves. And then they were actually having a little bit of a different approach to, again, hold a little bit bigger space. Because when people come to those discoveries on their own in their healing process, they're so much more powerful than that, hey, I think you should try this or do that. And we've kind of known that as therapy has evolved. But those are some of the sort of interesting observations of kind of what people thought they were going into the retreat for. And then the reflections about, what actually happened for them in those couple of days together.
I talked to a lot of people doing a lot of psychedelic work, and by far, I hear more about the retreat, the breathwork retreat we did, or just, and people who did the breathwork retreat in other areas that weren't necessarily with me. That comes up still all these months later over any other work that people are doing. So there really was, and really, I just had a conversation about it. I want to say it was last week or the week before with somebody who was at the Portugal retreat. There's something special about breathwork for sure. But as I said, I really do think it had a lot to do with the way you put it together.
I'm kind of curious, and obviously you don't need to get into too many details, but any general themes there that people were sharing?
It's a good question. I have to think about that.
And all good. I know it's kind of like sensitive information with people sharing stuff. So
yeah, and really the thing that comes to me is just the power that they have within themselves. Right? Because we assign so much to the plant when we're doing, or whatever the substance is. We assign so much to it. And so I think the big part of it is to realize that it's something that they have, even though that's the same case for the other work that they're doing, but just the realization.
That's what really kind of turned me on to this work was I was so skeptical going into it, thinking, this isn't going to do anything. I had like this near-death experience. I had all these psychedelic experiences. This is a bunch of hoo-ha bullshit in a sense. And that first experience still sticks with me. And I think it's actually the one experience that is a driving force in my life. It's the one experience I go back to pretty frequently to think about and integrate. And going in so skeptical, thinking like this isn't going to do anything, and coming out and kind of being blown away, going, what was that? But also the special thing that I think people get with the breathwork technique is the space holding. And so, if you go to a normal or quote unquote normal medicine retreat somewhere, everybody's down, right? You have the facilitators kind of holding that space, and everybody's under the influence. And this isn't something special that we put together just for Vital, right? This is just part of the technique. Stan ended up doing this breather-sitter pair because he hurt his back while he was at Esalen and decided to partner people up. And so it was this kind of natural, organic process of it coming together. And Al, something you said just about like people talking about how to bring it back into their lives. I mean, I think that was a huge impact for me during my undergrad when I was going through all that training and thinking about how do I bring that back into, say, some of the mental health services I would then provide in residential. And just sitting there and being with people while they're in crisis and really just sitting back and thinking, wow, like I've had really intense experiences with sitting with people in breath work. How do I do that when people are just in crisis, not being in a non-ordinary state? And for me, I think it helped me to be with people a little bit more grounded because the thing that it taught me was how to be with myself a little bit more than how do I fix this situation that's in front of me? And that's a really hard lesson, especially those that we are traditionally trained and we want to do interventions and we want to help somebody. And, we feel like it's part of our job to do something, but to sometimes pull back and let somebody have an experience without that intervention is, I think, really powerful. And I think an important lesson too.
The second thing that just came up that we've talked about it because, this was my experience, that it was a very somatic experience for me. But that's actually come up at least a couple times that I can think of, was that not having access to their body and going through breath work gave them access to their body. And like they suddenly got it like, oh, that's what a somatic experience is. And so that would be the second thing I can think of. I have a couple people in mind who it definitely cracked things open for them.
Alice, were you going to chime in there at all? I want to come back to the somatic aspect, but...
Yeah, I just, one of the things I've observed, and I don't, this is just from kind of what I've seen, is that when you pair up with someone and one day you're the journeyer and the other person's the sitter and you're doing your thing. And then when you're the sitter, it's a reciprocity. It's that one day I'm caring for you and the next day you're caring for me. And what we've seen in these sort of pairings with people is that's how life is. I mean, sometimes other people are taking care of us. Sometimes we're taking care of them. And also people have been surprised at the impact of witnessing a group of people doing work on the mat, a group of people being brave enough to, we talk about like, if you see a door or if there's possibility of death and dismemberment, like go for it. The how a privilege it is to sort of watch somebody going through their process, and then just facilitators are doing certain things. The sitters are just caring. And, in this research around gratitude, they say that it's not only if I'm giving Kara a gift, I'm getting a benefit, she's getting a benefit. But if somebody sees me giving her that gift for sitting in a restaurant, the person who is observing our interaction has as much of a benefit. So it's the process of when you're a sitter and you're caring for your person, and then people feeling like, what does it feel like to get someone's just full care and attention, undivided attention? Because we had breathwork retreat this weekend. We're like, when was the last time that 3 hours you knew you would not be interrupted? Right. Like nothing could interrupt you. The phone's not there. There's no interruptions. When does that happen? So that power, and we've talked about this, that my belief is that we're going to change the way we heal by just how we care and how we hold space for each other. And people reported like, wow, I want to go home and just hold this space for the people that I love. Like just give them my full attention.
It's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. So what somebody said, like, how can I be a pillow for somebody in my life?
Yeah.
And it's such it's a really great point because how many times in our daily life, like we just maybe need to be held in a way where somebody's not giving us like unsolicited advice or their opinions or stuff like that. And obviously that stuff comes, I think, usually from a good place, right? Like we want to help and, maybe it's just part of our communication as humans. It's like, I don't really know what to say right now. So maybe I'll give some advice or try to make you feel better, right? But also the opposite and that power of just being there and not maybe needing to do much. And obviously it gets really nuanced, right? Like it is important to do stuff and intervene, and whether it's verbal or whatever it is. But I think that space holding is really important. It's been a big lesson for me too. Kara, I want to come back to the somatic aspect. One reason why we've really kind of focused on breath work is obviously it's because that's how Joe and I started the podcast and project. We wanted to chat about the work of Stan Grof. We wanted to talk about breath work because that was like where our lineage was, and talking about how this is a really important modality for the psychedelic world. And so that's really where our roots are. But as I've kind of started to go a little bit deeper, especially during my grad school, into the somatic aspect of actually how important this is for helping to navigate the psychedelic experience and also with the integration aspect. And so there are a lot of folks that are coming into Vital that already have tons of so much medicine experience, right?
Right.
They've been to ceremonies, they've done their work. And so actually maybe being able to focus on breath work to learn how to integrate somatically. That was my one big insight after my first breath work session, was when I was like dabbling in my early 20s with lots of psychedelics, is that I was trying to solve all my problems in the transpersonal realm. And it felt like, not at that time, I think a little hindsight is that I was doing a lot of bypassing in a sense, thinking these things are just going to resolve and figure themselves out in a way if I just keep doing more, right? It wasn't until I ended up doing that breathwork experience, I was like, wow, I have not processed all that trauma in my body. I haven't had the container to maybe fully express it and go into it because I was just so in the cognitive loops of trying to rationalize and analyze and figure things out. I know you're trained in somatic experiencing, and so I would love to maybe hear some of your insights or maybe some things that have come up from having your breathwork experience, thinking about psychedelics integration. It's kind of an open-ended question, but
it is an open-ended question. I feel like I'm going to start with what happened to me, my experience in Pennsylvania, because breathwork is a full body experience, and if it's not, we need to have a conversation, because you're cut off, from a part of yourself for sure. But it is a full body experience because of the sensations that happen just from the breath work itself. And so, once we got, it's several cycles, but as I came down from the height of the breath, and I know you guys can correct me, I'm not a breath work expert, but, as you're kind of coming down the hill, and correct me.
No, you're good.
Okay, good. And all of these sensations are going through your body. I noticed that I had a panic. It's mild, but a panic came up, and I watched myself have a flight response in complete slow motion. I felt myself pulling to the right, and it was so slow. It was the slowest I've ever felt myself move in a psychedelic space. And I was able to bring myself back just as slowly. And just saying, you're safe, everything's okay. I was connecting to everybody in the room. I knew where everybody was, had a sense of it, and I was able to come back to center. And that was a really big deal because, I do this work in somatic experiencing, but to experience it that way just gave it a whole other level for me. And I've taken that with me into my work. I mean, I'm not just my work with clients, but my own personal work. Somatically, I'm able to recognize my flight patterns from a, true somatic place because of that experience. And, you want to get people there through somatic work, one-on-one, but breath work is just another really beautiful way to get there. And that's just one piece of the somatics from that experience. Were you going to say something?
No, I forget. You were already in somatic experiencing training before the retreat. So you had a little bit of insight of like nervous system regulation and, window of tolerance and all that stuff.
Yes, I did. Yeah. So I knew it was happening. And not everybody's going to recognize a flight pattern when it comes up, but they might describe it differently. They'll be aware that there's fear that's coming up or a sensation in the body. That's a whole podcast in itself. But
well, those sensations are really difficult for a lot of folks, right? Even like when I think about in the breathwork experience, like tetany or the tingling or the buzzing, right? A lot of people have a really difficult time with that, and will sometimes bring people out of the experience, and might need to flag somebody down and be like, "What's going on? I don't like this feeling." I guess from like a somatic experiencing lens, like how do you perceive that, or what's going on there for folks?
Well, say a little bit more. So so I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So like, my session is starting to take off, I'm breathing, and then all of a sudden I'm feeling kind of like this buzzing energy in my body, and I get fearful, right? I kind of like lock up and go, I don't know if I like this. What's going on with me?
It's a threat response. It's a threat to the system. And so it's a threat response, and we all respond differently to threat. We have fight, flight, and freeze, and fawn, which is really a piece of freeze. And so, I don't know that, and you guys would be able to say if anybody's had a fight response to that, but yeah, maybe they have. I was just thinking about our group if some of that energy came out, and I think a little bit, but that's what I would say is pay attention to how you're responding to it and what it's telling you, because what comes up during that tells you very much about what your tendency is and what you actually need to work on. And so for me, it's been flight. I don't have a huge fight response. We all have all of them, but we all, tend to have one more than the other. And so it's a window to seeing how your nervous system responds to a threat.
Yeah. And I guess to translate that to psychedelic work, like how important is it to like learn how to use your breath to navigate these types of responses? And, I'm sure Essie has some other sort of techniques, but I know for me, a big thing has been, how do I stick with this sensation and breathe with it and not let it completely kind of overwhelm me? Like when you said you have a flight response, that's my response too. And I was thinking about a ketamine training I was doing, and flight response came up. Some of my near-death experience material started to emerge, and I kept taking off my eye shades thinking, I need to get the hell out of here. Like this is, things are, but, I think having all those years of breath work and then the somatic training was like, okay, I know I'm just feeling really fearful right now. And this old narrative is starting to emerge. How can I just breathe with it? Even though I'm really uncomfortable with all these sensations in my body, it's triggering all sorts of like PTSD type of stuff. But how do I breathe with that and be with it? And I think that's the one thing that breath work has really taught me when like doing medicine work, right? It's like really starting to pay attention to your nervous system in a much different way. When people have that come up anxiety, right? That's like when people are like really, going to freak out a little bit. It's like, I don't like this feeling that's coming on to me, right? Yeah. And I think returning to our breath is a really, really powerful tool.
Returning to the breath, I think about pendulation. I think about grounding. Pendulation, I'll explain, is going from, to keep it simple, an overwhelming feeling, a difficult feeling, to a pleasant feeling in the body. And so when we go back and forth, that's a natural cycle of what we do, and then we discharge. So if we can go between the trauma vortex and the healing vortex, then it's just a cycle that allows us to discharge the energy that's there in that moment. Yeah. And then grounding. I mean, one of the things that I did during that session, besides working to get myself back to center, was I paid attention to the ground below me, because we're on these, thin mattresses. We're right against the ground, and just really sensing what's holding me and keeping me present. There's so many things we can do from a somatic perspective that I think can be weaved even more into breathwork work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also find it curious the metaphor that I use a lot is, when I'm doing plant medicine, it's like a roller coaster. I get on, there's a belt, I'm going on that ride. You're not until it pulls back into the station, like you are on that ride. And I feel like breath work is like a bicycle. You can still have a great ride on a bicycle. It could be really amazing, but you can also put your feet down. And you also get to determine the speed. And there's such agency in, I want to open that door, I don't want to open that door. And so I think that I definitely, my plant medicine experiences my psychedelic experiences, I'm not sure I would have been able to navigate through them and have them be transformational if I had not had, as you were saying, Kyle, that practice of what does it feel like and how can I feel okay? And, we talk about double bookkeeping and transpersonal breath work and knowing that you're in the space and that you've developed relationship with your sitter and the facilitators in the space and you feel and many people have reflected that like there were doors that many times they were not going to go into, even in one-on-one experiences or like with somebody individually. But when they were in the group process, there was something that just felt like a bigger net. And so they were willing to like pull their feet up and get that bicycle going as fast as they wanted to go. And people do have the same, exceptional experiences, just like you would have as a psychedelic experience. But that agency really builds a confidence about like, I can keep growing and changing and face some of the hard things to make my way to the other side.
Yeah, and some of the stuff that you're saying, a big topic that's been coming up in the past like few months is like navigating difficult and challenging experiences. Like I think there was just a paper that was released, kind of exploring this, and I know it's come up this year in Vital. People kind of asking and being curious around this, and I think that's one thing that, maybe a lot of retreats like necessarily aren't doing, or just maybe the psychedelic like community field, whatever we want to call it in general, is like, how do we really prep people for this and really try to create a container where, they're learning skills to kind of navigate these experiences. And I think that's a big reason why, or at least for me, why I've really integrated breathwork into the Vital program, is to like think about people are just having these experiences all the time. But, we're not also doing great training, I think, as like the community, the whatever we want to call it, around how do we really maximize the benefits here? Like, how do we teach people more about like nervous system regulation, how to breathe, how to stay with, how to titrate and pendulate the experience? Because sometimes people just go to these retreats or gatherings, they get a big dose, they're blown open, they come back and they go, what the hell just happened? And sometimes, their life starts to get really shaken up. And yeah, I don't think, I think it's it's not it's not a thing that's happening to everybody all the time, but it is happening. And I think we need to be mindful of that, especially as psychedelics become more and more popular and access is getting easier to some degree. It's like, how do we really help people to create that landing pad, in a sense, and those navigation skills?
One thing that I'm thinking of as you're saying that is it wasn't just the group processing, meaning sitting in a circle and sharing, but I can think of individual interactions with each person, meaning the staff, you and the staff. Every single person I watched connect with everybody in that retreat. So there was individual connection as well as the group connection. I saw everybody had off conversations and time with, going off for a walk or just sitting at the lunch table. So everybody got individual attention and like a real interest around what they were bringing in and then what they were taking away. Just a witness to a lot of those conversations and how important that was.
Well, somewhere along the line, we were like, hey, how do we co-create this with the Vital students? Because the Vital students come with just amazing backgrounds and practices and interests. And so, Kara reached out and said, hey, I've got this thing. So Kara, I'd love to have you share kind of what you brought, because it just added, it's just a whole nother element to the retreat.
That was fun. Yeah. I remember Kyle had put out the beginning of Vital. If anybody has anything that they want to share at these retreats, please reach out. And so once I had landed on Pennsylvania, I reached out and asked if I could bring tea and do a tea ceremony for everybody. And so we had 3 mornings, literally as the sun was rising, just before Marco's class or yoga or chanting, and 3 different groups, and led them in an hour-long tea ceremony. And it's completely silent. And it felt like a really good addition to the retreat itself. And I was just so thrilled to be able to share something that's meaningful to me. And, it touched a lot of people. And it was nice to be able to bring a little part of me and share in that way. It was really nice.
It was so beautiful. And so we did that in the mornings, and then in the evenings, we had what we call fireside chats. And so we've sort of carried that. That was the first retreat we did it, but people could say, "Hey, I'm really interested in this, and I'd like to share for 20 minutes about this particular
Yeah,
element."
I loved it.
So that
It
was
was
that was
great.
super fun. We had s'mores and a lot of good stuff after that. And I think the other thing that has surprised me is that we started WhatsApp groups just at the beginning, just so people could logistically make sure they got their flight, they got to all the logistics. And then during the retreat, people will be posting pictures, in there.
Mm.
And then it ended up that everybody wanted everybody else's pictures. And I will say that we've had 13 retreats, and I still have 13 group chats, and people are still active in there because
Yeah.
that process of, as you were saying, Kyle, like you have this experience. And when it's witnessed by other people, they understand that. And so many people say, I've not been able to sort of act like my true self. And so
Mm.
now you guys know me, and people will reach out and say, I'm having a bad day, or I'm celebrating a birthday, and so it's been so beautiful to see how people have stayed in touch, and that group has become something really critical for them. They're like, I don't have another group of people like this in my life to
Mm.
support me and understand and have witnessed that work, that hard work I did on the mat. So that's been really just so much fun to see people connect in that way and stay connected.
It's funny that you should say that, and I'm really glad that you brought it up. I'm on a lot of chats because I've done a lot of trainings and some retreats, and that is one of 2 of like the most active and the only 2, and one of the only 2 I really participate in. So.
They do drop off sometimes. Yeah. And as you were saying that, I was actually thinking, I just went to an event last week and thinking about, I mean, it wasn't a wellness retreat or anything like that. It was more kind of like business oriented, but it was getting a group of individuals together. I think there was like 16 of us, and for a collective cause to do kind of this like mastermind type thing. And I was thinking, oh yeah, like why didn't they start like a WhatsApp group beforehand so we could connect and get to know each other before the event? And then it actually, I think one of the participants actually took they took it under them to start it. So I just got the WhatsApp group from them. But I was just thinking like how impactful that was. I mean, like I have a hard time trying to keep up with all those chats. And sometimes I do. Like I love reading them. So, if you're listening, I do read some of them, and it does brighten my day. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. I just love seeing all the support, or yeah, as Alice, you said, like when somebody's having a really bad day, just kind of putting it in there and seeing the group come together. But I just thought like I left that event going like, man, I really wish like this, they would have fostered this type of, community where they're able to get people together, because there was really interesting people there. I wanted to stay connected. And obviously, we did share contacts, but I just thought about like how we've organized stuff, like almost like how it's made me feeling a little bit more comfortable, like creating that group process before and after had like a really big impact. And just feeling that on my end as a participant going into something and thinking about some of the things that like we've done, where I'm like, oh, that actually has a big impact on people sometimes, now that I'm like on the other end, which I thought it was
Right.
like really interesting. There's a part of me like, another
Agreed.
WhatsApp group, but I'm also like, what happens when I can stay connected and reach out and just feel that support from that little community? Yeah, it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's important, some people lump all their retreats together and it doesn't create the cohesion. So anyway, I'm glad you brought that up,
Yeah.
Alice.
So
Yeah.
sometimes there's these just little tiny things. And I mean, that's been just the beauty of being able to do these things, and also just appreciating, so often we have experiences and we're shy about getting feedback. And so we have also really
Mhm.
encouraged people, like, tell us just please keep telling us how we can make this better. And, every group has said something, and we've been really open. Really open about like, hey, that is a great idea. Let's make sure we do that next time. So that kind of open
Yeah.
learning mindset.
this is a constant evolution, right? And we're never, we're always striving to create a perfect retreat, and maybe one day we'll get there. But Alice, like I'm wondering, you said about like these little things, and so there are folks that are listening that probably put on like little groups, retreats, events, whatever it is. What are some things that you've really learned over the past few years, putting all this together, that you could share with others that are creating group spaces and events?
Yeah, I think, one of the things is really just the care that you take with the schedule, the art of like, when are you going to start and what order do you do things in? And how do you give people space to kind of do individual things, take their own time? How do they come together? The fireside chat definitely evolved, and that was an evolution. How do you allow for the group that you're with to co-create that with you? Another thing that we did was, most of us have been at retreats, and like you kind of want a little bit of facilitator time. And so, Kara, as you said, I've been to retreats where the facilitators all sit at a table or they disappear. They're on the stage, then they disappear. We always were kind of eating and doing things with people, but we created an office hours. So we always had some time during the day. It was in a private space that if somebody needed to be with a facilitator, somebody was available. And that also made a difference because, again, you don't want to be like, hey, Kyle, do you have a few minutes? Like you're feeling a little awkward. So those office hours really kind of helped that process, and just all the support around, sometimes people don't read every single thing that you send out an info packet. And so you can be the kind of people that are like, read the info packet, or you can be like, oh yeah, I have not read the info packet on the last retreat I went to. And the day before I was like, where am I going in Costa Rica to, asking those questions. And so just supporting people, and just that, I kind of think about it as being I always say I'm the mom at Christmas until everybody gets there. It's like gathering my children, to come home to this sort of homecoming place that they kind of haven't realized. And then, I'm the one when we're closing the door on the van being like, text me when you get home. Like, I want to make sure and we've had adventures. Everybody's had adventures getting home at a flat tire on the van. But it's just,
I was in that one.
Exactly. And, ironically, there was one retreat where we sort of called it the survivor retreat because the heat broke, the toilet broke. And so providing a perfect retreat is not what really matters. It's how we navigate. And, and one of the retreats, the heat broke. And so we had to decide. And so we pulled the whole group together and we were like, hey, what do you guys want to do? Do you want to be in the bigger room where it's a little colder? Do you want to be in the room and we had a vote. And we really had sort of like a process of like, let's all determine this together. It wasn't just the facilitators decided. So really, allowing that energy of the whole group to really be the power of what sort of brings everybody together. So I think those are a few of the things. You probably have a few too, Kyle, but little things.
Yeah, I'm just kind of laughing at that retreat with no heat. That retreat goes down history of the hiccups. But that group, I think, bonded very well, which was like really interesting. It's like when there's a little bit of adversity, I think it brings people together in a really interesting way. Like, I'm not too sure if like, the flat tire for you, Kara, like, brought people together.
It's too short.
So you weren't stranded on the road for hours and you guys are all bonding over that. But it is interesting to think about how like some of those experiences can really bond people. And it's not, it's stuff that you don't want to create, that just kind of happens. But I think about, there is a book on, I forget what it is, just about like, groups and people, and just how like during those times of adversity, that's when people really come together and really find some sort of like shared interest, which is, interesting. Yeah, for me, I mean, I'm not much of a logistics person. And so I was just really fortunate to have you and Meg to really help out. And when you're talking about, you're feeling like you're not really settled until everybody's there, just how important it is to have somebody on the back end to really deal with the logistics, especially when you're dealing with like, going to Costa Rica, right? International retreats, a lot of anxiety, and trying to create a lot of touch points for folks, because as you're saying, people don't read stuff. I sometimes don't read stuff. It's just, we're trying to filter so much information all the time. But how do we create those touch points to help people to like ease some of the anxiety that people are experiencing. Because yeah, taking off for a week and traveling, and especially if it's going like international to a place like Costa Rica, and maybe it's your first time getting on an airplane or going somewhere, and having all those details and really trying to like provide touch points to have that support, I think is really, really important. Yeah, because I know for myself, even when I've been on retreats and I'm like, oh, I know it's in the info packet, but like, reading it over, just like, okay, do I have all the information right? But sometimes I have had that where like those touch points aren't there, and I'm like feeling anxious about all the travel. So I think that's a really big thing. Kara, it looked like
And I know, yeah, I was going to say something about Meg. I remember feeling completely taken care of by Meg on that trip, and just the seamlessness, and even being able to communicate with her and saying we're missing our fifth person for the van, and she responded immediately so that we wouldn't get to the location late. She was fantastic. I remember my early conversations and just how smooth that was. I mean, I wasn't going to Costa Rica, but there's still a lot of details, and there was transportation to meet up with others, and I didn't have to worry about it.
Yeah. There's another thing that just kind of pops in my head, because people are always asking about like, why did you do it this way? Why did you do it that way? Like, shouldn't you include X, Y, and Z? And something that I think about when we're creating offerings is just being kind of like clear on, what you are offering. And Alice, I think in that book, The Art of Gathering, they really talk about that. And I have been to retreats where, they advertise this one thing, and then all of a sudden somebody's doing neo-shamanic stuff, and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't know I was signing up for this. So I think also like being clear about like, the framework and how things are going to operate and informed consent, all that stuff I think is really, really important, as well as, retreat and event providers. All right. Well, it looks like we're getting at the hour here. Anything that you guys feel like you want to close with for today? And Alice, I guess we'll start with you.
Yeah, you guys have been so supportive. It's just been really a group effort and I think that, that aspect of, again, what are we co-creating? And this awareness of, if we're going to spend time together, how do we make sure that it's not something we could all be doing on Zoom, and really have those meaningful connections, for people taking that time. I like to say, how do we walk slowly and bow often, and take that time and space to do that, so that we can be the leaders. All of us are in positions to make change and to really bring forth more exceptional experience so people can grow and learn and be inspired. And so I just really appreciate, the Prasada team and the Infinite Center team and just the Vital team. And, Kyle, you and Joe, I always just really, at every retreat, I just say, thank you, thank you, thank you, because, this work takes a lot of courage to be out here and to be trying to build organizations that are making this happen in kind of the Wild West. And so I really think that that's what makes Psychedelics Today community different, is that it really is a community. And, there's a focus on harm reduction, but it's also about like, how are we coming together to make a difference? So I have loved being part of the team, and it's just really been so fantastic. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. And yeah, thank you for all your work over the years. Couldn't done it without you and the team. All right, Kara.
I was thinking how your retreats actually, even though they're originally set up for Vital students, number one, I would say if you're in Vital and you're thinking, I'm just going to go do an outside retreat, don't dismiss what's offered, because it's really, really good and really rich. But we had people outside of Vital that came to our retreat, and I think that's worth mentioning. And it was beautiful to be able to, share with people in Vital and people doing other things in that space.
That has been really special to think about. There's times when we're like, it just wants to be closed off to the Vital students. And then we've had discussions around opening up to folks that are kind of part of either the PT community, the Prasada Infinite Center, or folks that we're working with. And it has been really, really special to be able to invite folks that aren't necessarily in Vital. And I think sometimes I've heard like people feeling a little anxious that, it might be kind of cliquey. It's like, oh, all these folks are part of a training program. And then coming in, and I think, Kara, as you mentioned, like trying to just be all on the same level at that time, where it's like, we want to just come together as a group of folks, exploring and kind of diving in.
Yeah, absolutely. It didn't feel like a vital click whatsoever. Yeah.
Another kind of question popped in my head as we're closing out here, and maybe it's another way to end. Why do you think it's vital to have an exceptional experience, part of training or part of your life, however you want to answer that? Just thinking about the people that aren't in Vital coming to the retreats.
I like to say, sometimes you're ready to, we have groups or families or communities that we're in. And as we start to grow and change, we're looking for our next group of people. And so I think that having the courage to go into new spaces with new groups of people and find new connections or relationships is part of just a healthy growth process over a life. And we change and are inspired in group, in relationship. So
Love it.
I'm really wanting to come up with something profound, but but it feels really simple. I mean, I had an uncle that said life is for the living, and he said this to me as he was dying. And so I always feel like experience is why we're here. Beautiful.
I always think where I was talking to Lenny, our breathwork teacher on the podcast, and asking him like, why is breathwork important? Why should people have these types of experiences? And he had this answer: are you curious? Are you curious about your relationship with yourself and the universe? And if not, go watch a movie, go be part of somebody else's story. And I think that's what these retreats and these experiences kind of offer, is a curiosity within ourselves, to learn how we can connect and feel connected to ourselves, to the people around us, to the universe, however you want to start to define that. But I think that's what has kept me coming back to this work. It's always not necessarily about the experience that I have. It's about the people that we're doing this with. And there's so many times I've gone to like breathwork retreats or something, and the community is like, that's why I'm coming back. Like, it's cool to explore and have these big cathartic experiences, but there's something about coming back to people that can understand it, support it, be seen, be heard, be witnessed, and connect. And I think that's a really important thing, in my opinion. So, yeah. So I want to thank you both for your time, for sharing. This has been really wonderful, and really enjoyed the conversation. So Alice, if people are interested in learning more about any of the retreats, I know we'll have it in the show notes. People can click a link and find out about our upcoming retreat. We have a retreat happening in Pennsylvania at a retreat center called River Mountain, and that is July 9th through the 14th. But if people are interested, where can people find info?
Yeah, so our website is theinfinitecenter.org, and we've got all the retreats listed. We've got those Vital retreats. We've got some weekend retreats coming up, so that's where you can find more of the details.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and we'll have some stuff in the show notes and on our website as well. So thank you again, Alice and Kara, and hope everybody enjoyed this episode.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Alice and Kara. And I hope it provided a little bit more insight around our retreats that we've been doing with our Vital program. We've been doing these for the past 2 years, and I've been traveling around with Alice, and she's really been the person behind the scenes helping to put on these retreats. So I thought it was fun to finally get Alice on the show to chat about the work of putting on these retreats. And as always, the importance of breathwork and somatics, and how these are really great tools for navigating the psychedelic experience. And also on that somatic topic, really great to have Kara on the show, which I just realized she was on our previous show, maybe 2 weeks ago, with Pierre Bouchard talking about somatics. And Kara is going to be actually part of our somatic elective in Vital this summer, which I'm super excited about. And so if you are interested in joining our upcoming retreat, that is going to be our breathwork retreat at River Mountain.
River Mountain's the retreat center. It's in Everett, Pennsylvania. That's going to be July 9th through the 14th. You can learn more at psychedelicstoday.com. Click on the events tab and go down to the transpersonal breathwork at River Mountain Retreat Center. And you can learn more and sign up there. We did a retreat here last summer. Really, really beautiful venue. Pennsylvania. You'll get 2 experiences as a breather and 2 experiences as a sitter, and then followed by all sorts of other different classes, yoga, meditation, hiking, and etc. We would love to see you there. So if you've been interested in attending one of our breathwork workshops, this will be a really great opportunity to do so. And again, you can learn more at psychedelicstoday.com and click the events tab to sign up and learn more. And I think that's it for this outro. So if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, feel free to send us an email, info@psychedelicstoday.com. Make sure that you're checking us out on our social media platforms. Really great way to stay up to date with what we're up to. And just wishing you a beautiful day, beautiful week, whenever you're listening to this episode. And we will catch you on the next episode of Psychedelics Today. Take care, everybody.